O Krishna, beloved son of Nanda Maharaj, I am your eternal servant, but somehow or other I have fallen into this ocean of nations, and although I am struggling very hard, there is no way I can save myself. If you kindly pick me up and fix me as one of the particles of dust at your lotus feet, that will save me. In a similar way, Bhaktivinoda sang, Padi Padi Pavarna Jale, Tari Badi Na Keiki Upai. My dear Lord, I cannot remember when I somehow or other fell into this ocean of nations, and now I can find no way to rescue myself. We should remember that everyone is responsible for his own life. If an individual becomes a pure devotee of Krishna, he is then delivered from the ocean of nations.
"51. The subtle body is endowed with 16 parts, the 5 knowledge-acquiring senses, the 5 working senses, the 5 objects of sense gratification, and the mind. This subtle body is an effect of the 3 modes of material nature. It is composed of insurmountably strong desires, and therefore it causes the living entity to transmigrate from one body to another in human life, animal life, and life as a demigod. When the living entity gets the body of a demigod, he is certainly very jubilant. When he gets a human body, he is always in lamentation. And when he gets the body of an animal, he is always afraid. In all conditions, however, he is actually miserable. His miserable condition is called samsriti, or transmigration in material life. Did it make you feel better? Purport. The sum and substance of material conditional life is explained in this verse. The living entity, the 17th element, is struggling alone, life after life. This struggle is called samsriti, or material conditional life. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the force of material nature is insurmountably strong. Daivihiyesha gunamayi mamamaya duratyaya. Material nature harasses the living entity in different bodies. But if the living entity surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he becomes free from this entanglement, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Mameva ye prapadyante maya me tam tarantite. Thus his life becomes successful. 52. The foolish embodied living entity, inept at controlling his senses and mind, is forced to act according to the influence of the modes of material nature against his desires. He is like a silkworm that uses its own saliva to create a cocoon and then becomes trapped in it with no possibility of getting out. The living entity traps himself in a network of his own fruitive activities and then can find no way to release himself. Thus he is always bewildered and he repeatedly dies. Purport. As already explained, the influence of the modes of nature is very strong. The living entity entangled in different types of fruitive activity is like a silkworm trapped in a cocoon. Getting free is very difficult unless he is helped by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 53. Not a single living entity can remain unengaged, even for a moment. Nahi kashit shanamapi jatutishyat karmakrit karyate hivasha karma gunai swabhavikar balat. One must act by his natural tendency according to the 3 modes of material nature, because this natural tendency forcibly makes him work in a particular way. Purport. The swabhavika, or one's natural tendency, is the most important factor in action. One's natural tendency is to serve because a living entity is an eternal servant of God. The living entity wants to serve, but because of his forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Lord, he serves under the modes of material nature and manufactures various modes of service, such as socialism, humanitarianism, and altruism. However, one should be enlightened in the tenets of Bhagavad Gita and accept the instruction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that one give up all natural tendencies for material service under different names and take to the service of the Lord. One's original natural tendency is to act in Krishna consciousness because one's real nature is spiritual. The duty of a human being is to understand that since he is essentially spirit, he must abide by the spiritual tendency and not be carried away by material tendencies. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has therefore sung, Miche Mayara Boshe, Jacho Beshe, Kacho Habu Dububai. My dear brothers, you are being carried away by the waves of material energy and are suffering in many miserable conditions. Sometimes you are drowning in the waves of material nature, and sometimes you are tossed like a swimmer struggling in the ocean. As confirmed by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this tendency to be battered by the waves of Maya can be changed to one's original natural tendency, which is spiritual, when the living entity comes to understand that he is eternally Krishna Das, a servant of God, Krishna. Jiv Krishna Das, e Bishwas Korleto Artukonai. If instead of serving Maya under different names, one turns his service attitude toward the Supreme Lord, he is then safe, and there is no more difficulty. If one returns to his original natural tendency in the human form of life, by understanding the perfect knowledge given by Krishna himself in the Vedic literature, one's life is successful. 54. The fruit of activities a living entity performs, whether pious or impious, are the unseen cause for the fulfillment of his desires. This unseen cause is the root for the living entity's different bodies. Because of his intense desire, the living entity takes birth in a particular family and receives a body which is either like that of his mother or like that of his father. The gross and subtle bodies are created according to his desire. Purport. The gross body is a product of the subtle body. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 8.6, Yang vapi smaran bhavam tajatyante kalevaram tam tam evaiti kaunteya sadatad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. The atmosphere of the subtle body at the time of death is created by the activities of the gross body. Thus, the gross body acts during one's lifetime, and the subtle body acts at the time of death. The subtle body, which is called linga, the body of desire, is the background for the development of a particular type of gross body, which is either like that of one's mother or like that of one's father. According to the Rig Veda, if at the time of sex the secretions of the mother are more profuse than those of the father, the child will receive a female body, and if the secretions of the father are more profuse than those of the mother, the child will receive a male body. These are the subtle laws of nature which act according to the desire of the living entity. If a human being is taught to change his subtle body by developing a consciousness of Krishna, at the time of death, the subtle body will create a gross body in which he will be a devotee of Krishna, or if he is still more perfect, he will not take another material body, but will immediately get a spiritual body and thus return home back to Godhead. This is the process of transmigration of the soul. Therefore, instead of trying to unite human society through pacts for sense gratification that can never be achieved, it is clearly desirable to teach people how to become Krishna conscious and return home back to Godhead. This is true now and, indeed, at any time. 55. Since the living entity is associated with material nature, he is in an awkward position. But if in the human form of life he is taught how to associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotee, this position can be overcome. Purport. The word Prakriti means material nature, and Purusha may also refer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one wants to continue his association with Prakriti, the female energy of Krishna, and be separated from Krishna by the illusion that he is able to enjoy Prakriti, he must continue in his conditional life. If he changes his consciousness, however, and associates with the Supreme Original Person, Purusham Shashvatam, or with his associates, he can get out of the entanglement of material nature. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tattvataha, one must simply understand the Supreme Person Krishna in terms of his form, name, activities, and pastimes. This will keep one always in the association of Krishna. Tyakva deham punar janma naiti mameti sorjuna. Thus, after giving up his gross material body, one accepts not another gross body, but a spiritual body in which to return home back to Godhead. Thus, one ends the tribulation caused by his association with the material energy. In summary, the living entity is an eternal servant of God, but he comes to the material world and is bound by material conditions because of his desire to lord it over matter. Liberation means giving up this false consciousness and reviving one's original service to the Lord. This return to one's original life is called mukti, as confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam, Mukti hitvayata rupam swarupena vyavastitihi.
Mm. 56, 57. In the beginning, this Brahmana, named Ajamil, studied all the Vedic literatures. He was a reservoir of good character, good conduct, and good qualities. Firmly established in executing all the Vedic injunctions, he was very mild and gentle, and he kept his mind and senses under control. Furthermore, he was always truthful, and he knew how to chant the Vedic mantras, and he was also very pure. Ajamil was very respectful to his spiritual master, the fire god, guests, and the elderly members of his household. Indeed, he was free from false prestige. He was upright, benevolent to all living entities, and well-behaved. He would never speak nonsense or envy anyone. Purport. The order carriers of Yamaraj, the Yamadutas, are explaining the factual position of piety and impiety and how a living entity is entangled in this material world. Describing the history of Ajamil's life, the Yamadutas relate that in the beginning he was a learned scholar of the Vedic literature. He was well behaved, neat and clean, and very kind to everyone. In fact, he had all good qualities. In other words, he was like a perfect Brahmana. A Brahmana is expected to be perfectly pious, to follow all the regulative principles, and to have all good qualities. The symptoms of piety are explained in these verses. Srila Viraraghava Acharya comments that Dridavrata means Dridam Pratam Stri Sangha Rahit Yatmaka Brahmacharya Rupam. In other words, Ajamil followed the rules and regulations of celibacy as a perfect brahmachari and was very soft-hearted, truthful, clean, and pure. How he fell down in spite of all these qualities and thus came to be threatened with punishment by Yamaraj will be described in the following verses. Text 58 and 60. Once this Brahmana, Ajamil, following the order of his father, went to the forest to collect fruit, flowers, and two kinds of grass, called Samit and Kusha. On the way home, he came upon a Shudra, a very lusty, fourth-class man who was shamelessly embracing and kissing a prostitute. The Shudra was smiling, singing, and enjoying as if this were proper behavior. Both the Shudra and the prostitute were drunk. The prostitute's eyes were rolling in intoxication, and her dress had become loose. Such was the condition in which Ajamil saw them. Purport. While traveling along the way, Ajamil came upon a fourth-class man and a prostitute, who are vividly described here. Drunkenness was sometimes manifest even in bygone ages, although not very frequently. In this age of Kali, however, such sin is to be seen everywhere, for people all over the world have become shameless. Long ago, when he saw the scene of the drunken Shudra and the prostitute, Ajamil, who was a perfect brahmachari, was affected. Nowadays, such sin is visible in so many places, and we must consider the position of a brahmachari student who sees such behavior. For such a brahmachari to remain steady is very difficult, unless he is extremely strong in following the regulative principles. Nevertheless, If one takes to Krishna consciousness very seriously, he can withstand the provocation created by sin. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we prohibit illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling. In Kali Yuga, a drunk, half-naked woman embracing a drunk man is a very common sight, especially in the Western countries, and restraining oneself after seeing such things is very difficult. Nevertheless, if by the grace of Krishna one adheres to the regulated principles and chants the Hare Krishna mantra, Krishna will certainly protect him. Indeed, Krishna says that his devotee is never vanquished. Kontiya pradijanihi nami bhakta pranashyati. Therefore, all the disciples practicing Krishna consciousness should obediently follow the regulated principles and remain fixed in chanting the holy name of the Lord. Then there is no need to fear. Otherwise, one's position is very dangerous, especially in this Kali Yuga. (61) The Shudra, his arm decorated with turmeric powder, was embracing the prostitute. When Ajamil saw her, the dormant lusty desires in his heart awakened, and in illusion he fell under their control. Purport. It is said that when one's body is smeared with turmeric, it attracts the lusty desires of the opposite sex. The word kama liptena indicates that the Shudra was decorated with turmeric smeared on his body. Text 62. As far as possible, he patiently tried to remember the instructions of the Shastras, not even to see a woman. With the help of this knowledge and his intellect, he tried to control his lusty desires, but because of the force of Cupid within his heart, he failed to control his mind. Purport. Unless one is very strong in knowledge, patience, and proper bodily, mental, and intellectual behavior, controlling one's lusty desires is extremely difficult. Thus, after seeing a man embracing a young woman and practically doing everything required for sex life, even a fully qualified Brahmana, as described above, could not control his lusty desires and restrain himself from pursuing them. Because of the force of materialistic life, to maintain self-control is extremely difficult unless one is specifically under the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through devotional service. Text 63. In the same way that the sun and moon are eclipsed by a low planet, the Brahmana lost all his good sense. Taking advantage of this situation, he always thought of the prostitute, and within a short time he took her as his servant in his house, and abandoned all the regulative principles of a Brahmana. Purport. By speaking this verse, Shukadeva Goswami wants to impress upon the mind of the reader that Ajamil's exalted position as a Brahmana was vanquished by his association with the prostitute, so much so that he forgot all his Brahminical activities. Nevertheless, at the end of his life, by chanting the 4 syllables of the name Narayana, he was saved from the gravest danger of falling down. Swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bayad. Even a little devotional service can save one from the greatest danger. Devotional service, which begins with chanting of the holy name of the Lord, is so powerful that even if one falls down from the exalted position of a Brahmana through sexual indulgence, he can be saved from all calamities if he somehow or other chants the holy name of the Lord. This is the extraordinary power of the Lord's holy name. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, it is advised that one not forget the chanting of the holy name, even for a moment. Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantascha dridavartaha. There are so many dangers in this material world that one may fall down from an exalted position at any time. Yet if one keeps himself always pure and steady by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, he will be safe without a doubt. 64. Thus Ajamil began spending whatever money he had inherited from his father to satisfy the prostitute with various material presentations so that she would remain pleased with him. He gave up all his Brahminical activities to satisfy the prostitutes. Purport. There are many instances throughout the world in which even a purified person, being attracted by a prostitute, spends all the money he has inherited. Prostitute hunting is so abominable that the desire for sex with a prostitute can ruin one's character, destroy one's exalted position, and plunder all one's money. Therefore, illicit sex is strictly prohibited. One should be satisfied with his married wife, for even a slight deviation will create havoc. A Krishna-conscious grihastha should always remember this. He should always be satisfied with one wife and be peaceful simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Otherwise, at any moment he may fall down from his good position, as exemplified in the case of Ajamil. Text 65. Because his intelligence was pierced by the lustful glance of a prostitute, the victimized Brahmana Ajamil engaged in sinful acts in her association. He even gave up the company of his very beautiful young wife, who came from a very respectable Brahmana family. Purport. Customarily, everyone is eligible to inherit his father's property, and Ajamil also inherited the money of his father. But what did he do with the money? Instead of engaging the money in the service of Krishna, he engaged it in the service of a prostitute. Therefore he was condemned and was punishable by Yamaraj. How did this happen? He was victimized by the dangerous, lustful glance of a prostitute. Although born of a Brahmana family, this rascal, bereft of intelligence because of the prostitute's association, earned money somehow or other, regardless of whether properly or improperly, and used it to maintain the prostitute's sons and daughters. This Brahmana irresponsibly spent his long lifetime transgressing all the rules and regulations of the Holy Scripture, living extravagantly and eating food prepared by a prostitute. Thus he is full of sins. He is unclean and is addicted to forbidden activities. Purport. Food prepared by an unclean, sinful man or woman, especially a prostitute, is extremely infectious. Ajamil ate such food, and therefore he was subject to be punished by Yamaraj. Text 68. This man, Ajamil, did not undergo atonement. Therefore, because of his sinful life, we must take him into the presence of Yamaraj for punishment. There, according to the extent of his sinful acts, he will be punished, and thus purified. Purport. The Vishnudutas had forbidden the Yamadutas to take Ajamil to Yamaraj, and therefore the Yamadutas explained that taking such a man to Yamaraj was appropriate. Since Ajamil had not undergone atonement for his sinful acts, he was to be taken to Yamaraj to be purified. When a man commits murder, he becomes sinful, and therefore he must be killed. Otherwise, after death, he must suffer many sinful reactions. Similarly, punishment by Yamaraj is a process of purification for the most abominable, sinful persons. Therefore, the Yamadutas requested the Vishnudutas not to obstruct their taking Ajamil to Yamaraj. Thus in the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 6th canto, 1st chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam entitled The History of the Life of Ajamil.
Bravo. Bravissimo. Sadhu, sadhu. Shamyaprash, microphone. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Tech team, we need a tech team over here.
Krishna. I just want to appreciate one thing Prabhupada said in a purport. He said, therefore, this is from text 54, therefore, instead of trying to unite human society through pacts for sense gratification that can never be achieved, it is clearly desirable to teach people how to become Krishna conscious and return home back to Godhead. I mean, it's so like the naked truth, you know. Human society is, material society is just pacts for sense gratification that can never be achieved.
It's noble working for Krishna consciousness. All other kinds of endeavors are patchwork at best and really a waste of time. I really like the definitions of the modes of nature in the categories of peaceful, restless, and foolish. That makes it sutra-esque and very clear to understand what the results are. What are the things?
I wanted to ask a question.
Hold a little closer.
I wanted to ask a question. It's in connection to what we read in the 5th canto, that a sinful man and woman who engage in illicit sex, and they go to this hell where they embrace the hot iron form of the woman or the man. And when we read it, it almost seemed as if the man and the woman were on the same level of responsibility and subject to the same level of punishment. So when we were reading this, it was reminding me of that, and it also reminds me of something in the 3rd canto where it's mentioned that women are, in so many words it says, Shami Praska maybe help me out, because we went over it recently in Bhagavatam class in Denver, that women, they don't, they're not as responsible for they have some sort of degree of less responsibility, and I'm just wondering how that is that the case, or they get the same exact responsibility and the same kind of punishment for their activities? Like this prostitute here, is she also going to be, because the prostitutes are also there in Krishna Lila, it's like a Vedic thing also, prostitutes are also there, so they're also subject to that same hell that we read about.
Mixing that makes it a little too convoluted, that second part. In any case, some living entities are more vulnerable than others, and they require more protection. We'd have to see what the Manusmriti says about the situation, but generally the case is when those are living entities are more helpless than others, and they're not considered, for instance, animals are not considered as responsible as others because they're in a more helpless condition. So it stands to reason in the same way that those who are considered helpless and need protection and so forth are taken in the same light.
There's a verse in the Manusmriti that says, old men, infirm people, and old women, and women in general, and children, they're not considered punishable. But if I remember, you help me now if my memory is a little vague here, but I'm pretty sure that in that section it described men embracing red hot women and women embracing red hot men, and it did say that men and women who engage in those kind of activities, they go there and they take this punishment. You know, so it's like Vaisesika Prabhu said, your question mixed in a lot of things, because it isn't just one thing, whether the person's a man or a woman. You know, there's a lot of things that determine the strength of the seriousness of the sin, and therefore it has to be judged on an individual case. I'm almost sure of that.
I like this. Unless one is very strong in knowledge, patience, and proper bodily, mental, and intellectual behavior, controlling one's lusty desires is extremely difficult. I like the patience there that, these things will come and one patiently can tolerate or resist that temptation. Just like that definition of patience.
Thank you.
Patience there.
Person's sinful or not so sinful. Is it? I'd like Vaisesika Prabhu to remember with his sterling memory that section we read that was talking about the different degrees of implications in the modes of nature. Well, first of all, they described it as happy and mixed and suffering. But there was another statement that said something to the effect that the degrees of sin is also determined by those three categories. Can you remember? I can't remember it exactly. Maybe you can look it up.
One thing that I may be referring to was the section where Prabhupada quotes Urdhvan Gachanti Sattvasta. Those who are in the mode of goodness go up, those in the mode of passion, the middle world, those in the mode of ignorance down. And he said, so those who are very pious, they go to the heavenly planets. Those who don't perform overly sinful activities remain in the middle sphere, and those who perform abominable sinful acts go down. And then
when you study astrology, you'll see the study of astrology, and it's been mentioned a couple of times in the verses that in purports we've been reading. Bhrigu Samhita was mentioned. That is a treatise by Bhrigu Muni that if you read it properly, you can find out what you were in your past life, what you're going to be in your future life, according to when and where you were born, precisely. So the study of astrology explains to us what the details are of the effects of the modes of nature upon us, depending on where the planets are, in which signs, and which houses. And a lot of things have to be taken into consideration when it comes to it's a divinatory science. It gives you, that's why it's called Jyotish Shastra. Jyotish means light. It gives you light to be able to see what's going to happen, what has happened. So if you don't have that level of knowledge, and Prabhupada told us that there's very few bona fide astrologers and see, how to adjust all those different variables, and there's myriad of them. And you say something to a person, it's an offense, serious offense, and you can ruin a person's life, because so many people, everyone wants to know where they've been, what they've done, what they're doing, and what's going to happen to them. So it's very, very serious. But the point I am making, which is I think relevant to our discussion, is that it's such a extremely complicated permutations and combinations of forces upon each one of us at every moment, that to try to make a rule, even in Shastric, rules, is very difficult. You have to deal with each person individually.
But Yamaraj gets the last word, no matter what the astrologers say. He can overrule everybody.
I like very much the Vishnu Dutas. Very impressive. First of all, it was said that they can easily appear they were like, they could pretend that they are the Supreme Personality of Godhead without problem. They, in any sense, nobody can discriminate, they can detect that they are not, but they're never doing it. So this is impressive. And then, of course, their appearance, and then they didn't show any documents, like nowadays. Unqualified people, they just show some document, I'm such and such, so I can arrest you, or I can. But they were so qualified, it was visible, so they didn't need to legitimate themselves or something like this. So this is very nice, very nice. Also, when they started speaking to the Yamadutas, they were smiling. This serious situation, they are stopping them, but they were smiling. It was very nice. And then imposing their will, they could destroy them, beat them, just physically stuff, so many other means they have, but they just, but so authoritatively and nicely they started civilized discussion to clarify the authority, who is who and why he is doing what he is doing. And I like this very much, this way of solving the whole.
Not only that, their means of communication was to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have stated their case because they already knew which way they wanted to go. But
I'd like to.
Go right ahead. No, I insist. After you.
To stand off.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to make your point about how Yamaraj actually has the last say. The reason is, and it's stated in the verses, that he's as good as Brahma. I mean, he can see the past, present, and future. He didn't need astrology. I used that in the ordinary sense for people, on this plane. But
Hold
as
it
you're
close
saying,
to your mouth.
But as you're saying, no matter how much he knew, I mean, actually he knew that, and therefore we're going to see that when the Yamadutas thought, oh, nobody's as powerful as Yamaraj, he knows everything, so this is the law he told us, and therefore I'm doing this. But when they come to Yamaraj, he's going to give them the real deal.
Text 1. Shukadeva Goswami said, "My dear king, the servants of Lord Vishnu are always very expert in logic and arguments. After hearing the statements of the Yamadutas, they replied as follows." The Vishnudutas said, "Alas, how painful it is that irreligion is being introduced into an assembly where religion should be maintained. Indeed, those in charge of maintaining the religious principles are needlessly punishing a sinless, unpunishable person." Purport: the Vishnudutas accused the Yamadutas of violating the religious principles by attempting to drag Ajamil to Yamaraj for punishment. Yamaraj is the officer appointed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to judge religious and irreligious principles and to punish people who are irreligious. However, if completely sinless people are punished, the entire assembly of Yamaraj is contaminated. This principle applies not only in the assembly of Yamaraj, but throughout human society also. In human society, properly maintaining religious principles is the duty of the king's court or the government. Unfortunately, in this yuga, Kali Yuga, the religious principles are tampered with, and the government cannot properly judge who is to be punished and who is not. It is said that in the Kali Yuga, if one cannot spend money in court, one cannot get justice. Indeed, in courts of justice, it is often found that magistrates are bribed for favorable judgments. Sometimes religious men who preach the Krishna conscious movement for the benefit of the entire populace are arrested and harassed by the police and courts. The Vishnudutas, who are Vaishnavas, lamented for these very regrettable facts. Because of their spiritual compassion for all the fallen souls, Vaishnavas go out to preach according to the standard method of all religious principles, but unfortunately, because of the influence of Kali Yuga, Vaishnavas who have dedicated their lives to preaching the glories of the Lord are sometimes harassed and punished by courts on false charges of disturbing the peace. 3. A king or governmental official should be so well qualified that he acts as a father, maintainer, and protector of the citizens because of affection and love. He should give the citizens good advice and instructions according to the standard scriptures and should be equal to everyone. Yamaraj does this, for he is the supreme master of justice, and so do those who follow in his footsteps. However, if such persons become polluted and exhibit partiality by punishing an innocent, blameless person, where will the citizens go to take shelter for their maintenance and security? Purport. The king, or in modern times the government, should act as guardian of the citizens by teaching them the proper goal of life. The human form of life is especially meant for realization of one's self and one's relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because this cannot be realized in animal life. The duty of the government, therefore, is to take charge of training all the citizens in such a way that by a gradual process they will be elevated to the spiritual platform and will realize the self and his relationship with God. This principle was followed by kings like Maharaj Yudhishthira, Maharaj Parikshit, Lord Ramachandra, Maharaj Ambrish, and Prahlad Maharaj. The leaders of the government must be very honest and religious, because otherwise all the affairs of the state will suffer. Unfortunately, in the name of democracy, rogues and thieves are electing other rogues and thieves to the most important posts in the government. Recently, this has been proven in America, where the president had to be condemned and dragged down from his post by the citizens. This is only one case, but there are many others. Because of the importance of the Krishna consciousness movement, people should be Krishna conscious and should not vote for anyone who is not Krishna conscious. Then there will be actual peace and prosperity in the state. When a Vaishnava sees mismanagement in the government, he feels great compassion in his heart and tries his best to purify the situation by spreading the Hare Krishna movement, by spreading the Hare Krishna movement, by spreading the Hare Krishna movement. Text 4. The mass of people follow the example of a leader in society and imitate his behavior. They accept as evidence whatever the leader accepts. Purport. Although Ajamil was not punishable, the Yamadutas were insisting on taking him away to Yamaraj for punishment. This was adharma, contrary to religious principles. The Vishnudutas feared that if such irreligious acts were allowed, the management of human society would be spoiled. In modern times, the Krishna consciousness movement is trying to introduce the right principles of management for human society, but unfortunately the governments of Kali Yuga do not properly support the Hare Krishna movement because they do not appreciate its valuable service. The Hare Krishna movement is the right movement for ameliorating the fallen condition of human society, and therefore governments and public leaders in every part of the world should support this movement to completely rectify humanity's sinful condition. Daily double. 5 and 6. People in general are not very advanced in knowledge by which to discriminate between religion and irreligion. The innocent, unenlightened citizen is like an ignorant animal sleeping in peace with its head on the lap of its master, faithfully believing in the master's protection. If a leader is actually kind-hearted and deserves to be the object of a living entity's faith, how can he punish or kill a foolish person who is fully surrendered in good faith and friendship? Purport. The Sanskrit word vishvasta ghata refers to one who breaks faith or causes a breach of trust. The mass of people should always feel security because of the government's protection. Therefore, how regrettable it is for the government itself to cause a breach of trust and put the citizens in difficulty for political reasons. We actually saw during the partition days in India that all the Hindus and Muslims were living together peacefully. Manipulation by politicians suddenly aroused feelings of hatred between them. And thus when the Hindus and Muslims killed one another, over politics. In this age, animals are kept nicely sheltered, completely confident that their masters will protect them. But unfortunately, as soon as the animals are fat, they are immediately sent for slaughter. Such cruelty is condemned by Vaishnavas like the Vishnudutas. Indeed, the hellish conditions already described await the sinful men responsible for such suffering. One who betrays the confidence of a living entity, who takes shelter of him in good faith, whether that living entity be a human being or an animal, is extremely sinful. Because such betrayals now go unpunished by the government, all of human society is terribly contaminated. The people of this age are therefore described as manda sumanda matayo manda bhagya hupadrita. As a consequence of such sinfulness, men are condemned, manda. Their intelligence is unclear, sumanda mataya. They are unfortunate, manda bhagya, and therefore they are always disturbed by many problems, upadrutaha. This is their situation in this life, and after death they are punished in hellish conditions.
Text 7. Ajamil has already atoned for all his sinful actions. Indeed, he has atoned not only for sins performed in one life, but for those performed in millions of lives. For in a helpless condition, he chanted the holy name of Narayana. Even though he did not chant purely, he chanted without offense, and therefore he is now pure and eligible for liberation. Purport. The Yamadutas had considered only the external situation of Ajamil. Since he was extremely sinful throughout his life, they thought he should be taken to Yamaraj and did not know that he had become free from the reactions of all his sins. The Vishnudutas therefore instructed that because he had chanted the 4 syllables of the name Narayana at the time of his death, he was freed from all sinful reactions. In this regard, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes the following verses from the Smriti Shastra. Namno hi yavati shakti papanir harane harahe yavat kartum nishokti patakam pataki naraha. Simply by chanting one holy name of Hari, a sinful man can counteract the reactions to more sins than he is able to commit. Avishenapiyannami kirtite sarvapatakahi pumami muchite sadya singatrashtra migariha. If one chants the holy name of the Lord, even in a helpless condition, or without desiring to do so, all the reactions of his sinful life depart. Just as when a lion roars, all the small animals flee in fear. Garuda Purana. Sakrit uch charitam yena harir it yaksharam dvayam bhadapari kadastena mokshaya gamanam prati. By once chanting the holy name of the Lord, which consists of the 2 words Hari, 2 syllables, By once chanting the holy name of the Lord, which consists of 2 syllables, Hari, one guarantees his path to liberation. Skanda Purana. These are some of the reasons why the Vishnudutas objected to the Yamadutas taking Ajamil to the court. Text 8. The Vishnudutas continued. Even previously, while eating and at other times, this Ajamil would call his son, saying, "My dear Narayana, please come here." Although calling the name of his son, he nevertheless uttered the 4 syllables, Narayana. Simply by chanting the name of Narayana in this way, he sufficiently atoned for the sinful reactions of millions of lives. Purport. Previously, when engaged in sinful activities to maintain his family, Ajamil chanted the name of Narayana without offenses. To chant the holy name of the Lord, just to counteract one's sinful activities, or to commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name, is offensive. Namno balat asihi papa buddhihi. But although Ajamil engaged in sinful activities, he never chanted the holy name of Narayana to counteract them. He simply chanted the name Narayana to call his son. Therefore his chanting was effective. Because of chanting the holy name of Narayana in this way, he had already vanquished the accumulated sinful reactions of many, many lives. In the beginning he was pure, but although he later committed many sinful acts, he was offenseless because he did not chant the holy name of Narayana to counteract them. One who always chants the holy name of the Lord without offenses is always pure. As confirmed in this way, Ajamil was already sinless, and because he chanted the name of Narayana, he remained sinless. It did not matter that he was calling his son. The name itself was effective. Text 9 to 10. The chanting of the holy name of Lord Vishnu is the best process for atonement for a thief of gold or other valuables, for a drunkard, for one who betrays a friend or relative, for one who kills a brahmana, or for one who indulges in sex with the wife of his guru or another superior. It is also the best method for atonement for one who murders women, the king or his father, for one who slaughters cows, and for all other sinful men. Simply by chanting the holy name of Lord Vishnu, such sinful persons may attract the attention of the Supreme Lord, who therefore considers, because this man has chanted my holy name, my duty is to give him protection.
Just an interesting logistical fact. That is that Prabhupada doesn't. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives extensive commentary on it. And then, I know I'm getting there. And then Prabhupada puts in the last section of this chapter most of he summarizes what's in this 9th and 10th verse commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. It's fascinating commentary and really important. Yep, there it is. Supplementary note to this chapter. Several pages. By following the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies or undergoing atonement, everyone okay? Yes. By following the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies or undergoing atonement, sinful men do not become as purified as by chanting once the holy name of Lord Hari. Although ritualistic atonement may free one from sinful reactions, it does not awaken devotional service, unlike the chanting of the Lord's names, which reminds one of the Lord's fame, qualities, attributes, pastimes, and paraphernalia. Purport. Srila Chakravarti Thakur comments that the chanting of the holy name of the Lord has special significance that distinguishes it from the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies of atonement for severe, more severe, and most severe sinful actions. There are 20 types of religious scriptures called Dharma Shastras, beginning with the Manu Samhita and Parashara Samhita. But herein it is stressed that although one may become free from the reactions of the most sinful activities by following the religious principles of these scriptures, this cannot promote a sinful man to the stage of loving service to the Lord. On the other hand, chanting the holy name of the Lord even once not only frees one immediately from the reactions of the greatest sins, but also raises one to the platform of rendering loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is described as Uttama Shloka because he is famous for his glorious activities. Thus one serves the Lord by remembering his form, his attributes, and his pastimes. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that this is all possible simply by chanting the Lord's holy name because of the Lord's omnipotence. What cannot be achieved through the performance of Vedic rituals can be easily achieved through the chanting of the Lord's holy name. To chant the holy name and dance in ecstasy is so easy and sublime that one can achieve all the benefits of spiritual life simply by following this process. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu declares, Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. All glories to Sri Krishna Sankirtan. The Sankirtan movement we have started offers the best process for becoming purified of all sinful reactions and coming immediately to the platform of spiritual life. Okay, that deserves a Haribol. Everyone please say. 12. The ritualistic ceremonies of atonement recommended in the religious scriptures are insufficient to cleanse the heart absolutely, because after atonement one's mind again runs towards material activities. Consequently, for one who wants liberation from the fruit of reactions of material activities, the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, or glorification of the name, fame, and pastimes of the Lord, is recommended as the perfect process of atonement, because such chanting eradicates the dirt from one's heart completely. Purport. The statements in this verse have been confirmed previously in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.17. Shrimvatam swakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana ridnyantaksto hibadrani fitunoti suhritsatam. Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, super soul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who relishes his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. It is the special mercy of the Supreme Lord that as soon as he knows that one is glorifying his name, fame, and attributes, he personally helps cleanse the dirt from one's heart. Therefore, simply by such glorification, one not only becomes purified, but also achieves the results of pious activities, punya shravana kirtana. Punya shravana kirtana refers to the process of devotional service. Even if one does not understand the meaning of the Lord's name, pastimes, or attributes, one is purified simply by hearing or chanting of them. Such purification is called sattva bhavana. One's main purpose in life should be to purify his existence and achieve liberation. As long as one has a material body, one is understood to be impure. In such an impure material condition, one cannot enjoy a truly blissful life, although everyone seeks it. One's main purpose in human life should be to purify his existence and achieve liberation. As long as one has a material body, one is understood to be impure. In such an impure material condition, one cannot enjoy a truly blissful life, although everyone seeks it. Therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam 5.5.1 says, Tapodibyam putrake yena sattvam shudyet. One must perform, that sounds Russian, shudyet. One must perform tapasya, austerity, to purify his existence in order to come to the spiritual platform. The tapasya of chanting and glorifying the name, fame, and attributes of the Lord is a very easy purifying process by which everyone can be happy. Therefore, everyone who desires the ultimate cleansing of his heart must adopt this process. Other processes such as karma, jnana, and yoga cannot cleanse the heart absolutely. Shutyet. 13. At the time of death, this Ajamil helplessly and very loudly chanted the holy name of the Lord, Narayana, 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 Narayana. That chanting alone has already freed him from the reactions of all sinful life. Therefore, O servants of Yamaraj, do not try to take him to your master for punishment in hellish conditions. I like that. Don't try it. Don't even try it. Purport. The Vishnudutas, who are superior authorities, gave orders to the Yamadutas, who did not know that Ajamil was no longer subject to tribulation in hellish life for his past sins. Although he had chanted the holy name, Narayana, to indicate his son, the holy name is so transcendently powerful that he was automatically freed because he had chanted the holy name while dying. Ante Narayana Smritihi. As Krishna confirms in Bhagavad Gita 7.28, Isham tuntakatam papam jananam punyakarmanam te dvandva mohanir mukta bhajanti mam jadavrataha. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, and who are freed from the duality of delusion engage themselves in my service with determination. Unless one is freed from all sinful reactions, one cannot be promoted to the platform of devotional service. Elsewhere in Bhagavad Gita 8.5 it is stated, Antakale chamameva smaran mukva kalevaram yapriyati samadbhavam yati nashyatra samshayaha. If one remembers Krishna, Narayana, at the time of death, one is certainly eligible to return immediately home, back to Godhead. 14. One who chants the holy name of the Lord is immediately freed from the reactions of unlimited sins. Even if he chants indirectly to indicate something else, jokingly for musical entertainment, or even neglectfully. This is accepted by all learned scholars of the scriptures. In other words, Sanketyam parihasyam va stobam helanameva va vaikunta nama grahanam asheshaga haram vidu. 15. If one chants the holy name of Hari and then dies because of an accidental misfortune, such as falling from the top of a house, slipping and suffering broken bones while traveling on the road, being bitten by a serpent, being afflicted with pain and high fever, or being injured by a weapon, one is immediately absolved from having to enter hellish life, even though he is sinful. Purport. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 8.6, Yang yang vapi smaran bhavam tajat yante kalevaram tam tam evaita kaunteya sadatad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. If one practices chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, he is naturally expected to chant Hare Krishna when he meets with some accident. Even without such practice, however, if one somehow or other chants the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna, when he meets with an accident and dies, he will be saved from hellish life after death. Oh, Jagannath. Anything happens in a second. Picks up the falls and goes, oh, Jagannath. He's like, he's always ready.
I mean, how cool is that?
It doesn't get much cooler than that.
Doesn't get any cooler than that.
Just a small story I heard about Mahavishnu Swami. He was riding with Kavi Karnapur, devotee who lives with us in Denver, on a motorbike in some like Middle Eastern country, I think, Bangladesh, and they were driving along, and Mahavishnu Maharaj had just been preaching to all these Muslims and telling them, you think God is only Allah? He said, no, God is like the sun. He's, different names. He was like preaching to the group of Muslims and having them out. And then they got on a motorbike and they were driving away, and then they hit this like dirt ramp by accident kind of thing, and the bike went flying into the air. And as it was flying, Maharaj said, "Go Ranga!" They were like, it was like motorcycle's about to crash. Go Ranga! That was his response. So.
Hare Krishna. Yes, Mahavishnu Maharaj is transcendental. And once he was telling me when they were driving that Sankirtan bus, and trucks smashed them. So he put two legs in the front and said also, Gauranga! And still he was alive. So it was amazing. He broke the leg, but the major destruction was avoided. I mean, really, spiritual name is everything.
Gauranga! Authorities who are learned scholars and sages have carefully ascertained that one should atone for the heaviest sins by undergoing a heavy process of atonement, and one should atone for lighter sins by undergoing lighter atonement. Chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, however, vanquishes all the effects of sinful activities, regardless of whether heavy or light. Purport. In this regard, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes an incident that took place when Samba was rescued from the punishment of the Kauravas. Samba fell in love with the daughter of Duryodhana, and since according to Kshatriya custom, one is not offered a Kshatriya's daughter unless he displays his chivalrous valor, Samba abducted her. Consequently, Samba was arrested by the Kauravas. Later, when Lord Balaram came to rescue him, there was an argument about Samba's release. Since the argument was not settled, Balaram showed his power in such a way that all of Hastinapur trembled, and it would have been vanquished as if by a great earthquake. Then the matter was settled, and Samba married Duryodhana's daughter. The purport is that one should take shelter of Krishna Balaram, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose protective power is so great that it cannot be equaled in the material world. However powerful the reactions of one's sins, they will immediately be vanquished if one chants the name of Hari, Krishna, Balaram, or Narayana. Krishna Balaram. Text 17. Although one may neutralize the reactions of sinful life through austerity, charity, vows, and other such methods, these pious activities cannot uproot the material desires in one's heart. However, if one serves the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, he is immediately freed from all such contaminations. Purport. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhakti Panisha Nubhavo Viraktir Anyatra Cha. Devotional service is so powerful that one who performs devotional service is immediately freed from all sinful desires. All desires within this material world are sinful, because material desire means sense gratification, which always involves action that is more or less sinful. Pure bhakti, however, is anyabhilashita shunya. In other words, it is free from material desires, which result from karma and jnana. One who is situated in devotional service no longer has material desires, and therefore he is beyond sinful life. Material desires should be completely stopped. Otherwise, although one's austerities, penances, and charity may free one from sin for the time being, one's desires will reappear because his heart is impure. Thus he will act sinfully and suffer. Text 18. As a fire burns dry grass to ashes, so the holy name of the Lord, whether chanted knowingly or unknowingly, burns to ashes without fail all the reactions of one's sinful activities. Fire will act, purport, fire will act regardless of whether handled by an innocent child or by someone well aware of its power. For example, if a field of straw or dry grass is set afire, either by an elderly man who knows the power of fire, or by a child who does not, the grass will be burned to ashes. Similarly, one may or may not know the power of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, but if one chants the holy name, he will become free from all sinful reactions. Text 19. If a person unaware of the effective potency of a certain medicine takes that medicine, or is forced to take it, it will act even without his knowledge, because its potency does not depend on the patient's understanding. Similarly, even though one does not know the value of chanting the holy name of the Lord, if one chants knowingly or unknowingly, the chanting will be very effective. Purport. In the Western countries, where the Hare Krishna movement is spreading, learned scholars and other thoughtful men are realizing its effectiveness. For example, Dr. J. Stilson Judah, a learned scholar, has been very much attracted to this movement because he has actually seen that it is turning hippies addicted to drugs into pure Vaishnavas who voluntarily become servants of Krishna and humanity. Even a few years ago, such hippies did not know the Hare Krishna mantra, but now they are chanting it and becoming pure Vaishnavas. Thus they are becoming free from all sinful activities, such as illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling. This is practical proof of the effectiveness of the Hare Krishna movement, which is supported in this verse. One may or may not know the value of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, but if one somehow or other chants it, he will immediately be purified, just as one who takes a potent medicine will feel its effects, regardless of whether he takes it knowingly or unknowingly. Text 20. Sri Shukadev Goswami continued, My dear king, having thus perfectly judged the principles of devotional service with reasoning and arguments, the order carriers of Lord Vishnu released the Brahmana Ajamil from the bondage of the Yamadutas and saved him from imminent death. Text 21.